The trade alert reached me before I had taken off my boots. Harbor City had just lost 2-1 at home, the kind of loss that left the locker room louder than a win because everyone was trying not to blame the same mistake. Wet grass clung to my socks. Somebody had kicked a plastic bottle beneath the bench hard enough to crack it. On the television above the lockers, a commentator replayed my missed chance from the 87th minute and called it uncharacteristic hesitation. I was still staring at the frozen image of my own foot, arriving half a second too late, when Jordan held his phone in front of me. "You need to see this before the reporters ask." The headline was 6 words long: Grant Holloway traded to Harbor City FC. For a moment, the room narrowed to the white light of Jordan's screen. Grant's official photograph sat beneath the headline. Dark hair cropped close, square jaw, captain's posture, even in a studio portrait. He looked older than the last time I had seen him, but not different enough. My body recognized him before my mind could place 7 years between us. I could smell dust, rubber cleats, and the cold metal shelves of an equipment room at Hartwell University. I could feel his hand at the back of my neck. Then I heard his voice from the next morning, calm and almost bored, telling 2 teammates that I had misunderstood a conversation. Not a kiss, a conversation, as if my mouth had invented his. Jordan lowered the phone when he saw my face. "Miles, I'm fine." That answer usually means the opposite. "I'm tired, we lost, and our front office just traded for a center back, without warning anyone. Pick whichever explanation makes you happiest." Across the room, the television switched from our defeat to breaking transfer coverage. Archived footage appeared from the Hartwell Championship run. There I was at 21, thinner and less careful with my face, sprinting toward the corner flag after a goal. Grant caught me from behind and lifted me off the ground. The commentator called us former college teammates with legendary chemistry. I watched my younger self laugh into Grant's shoulder, like I believed being known by someone meant I was safe with him. A media assistant appeared at the locker room door and announced that Coach Nolan wanted me in the press room. Jordan stood with me, but I shook my head. I had spent years learning how to walk into rooms where strangers believed they were entitled to the most private parts of me. I had come out publicly during my second professional season, not because I wanted to become a symbol, but because hiding had started to feel like letting Grant's lie keep making decisions for me. I knew how to smile without offering anything. I knew how to make a boundary sound like charm. The first question was about the missed chance. The second was about my contract, which expired at the end of the season. The third came from a reporter in the front row who glanced at her phone before speaking. "Harbor City has reportedly acquired Grant Holloway from Westbridge. You played together at Hartwell. What does he bring to this team?" A dozen faces lifted toward me. "He's an experienced defender," I said. "Strong in transition, good in the air. Were you close?" The room went very still, in the way press rooms do, when everyone knows the real question has finally arrived. We were teammates. It was the same word Grant had used 7 years ago. I hated how easily it came out of my mouth. Coach Nolan ended the conference 2 questions later. In the corridor, he caught up with me and put a hand near my shoulder without quite touching it. He had learned early that I disliked being steered. "I didn't know the deal was final until 20 minutes ago," he said. "Does that make it a better deal?" "It makes it an urgent one. Our backline needs him." "And you think I'm going to argue with a transfer because we shared a college roster?" Nolan studied me. "I think you choose your words carefully when you're angry." Before I could answer, the loading doors at the far end of the corridor opened. Cold harbor air moved through the stadium, carrying rain and diesel from the service road. Grant walked in beside our sporting director with a black duffel over one shoulder. He wore a charcoal coat over a white shirt, no tie, and the expression of a man arriving at a funeral he had helped cause. He saw Nolan first, then he saw me. Grant stopped walking. The sporting director kept talking for another second, before noticing he was alone. Nolan said something about giving us a minute and guided him toward the offices. I wanted to object. Instead, I stayed where I was because leaving too quickly would have looked like retreat, and Grant had already taken enough ground from me. He came closer, but stopped several feet away. "Miles." He said my name softly, with none of the polished confidence from interviews. I wondered how many times he had rehearsed it on the flight. "Holloway." His eyes moved across my face, as if checking for damage 7 years too late. "I didn't know Harbor City was negotiating until this morning. Congratulations. That makes 2 of us." I asked where else they were considering. And when they said here, his jaw shifted. I didn't refuse. It was such a Grant answer. Technically honest, carefully incomplete. A staff photographer appeared at the corner and asked us to stand together for a reunion shot. Grant looked at me first, waiting. At Hartwell, he had never waited before putting a hand on my shoulder for cameras. I moved beside him, but left enough space between us for the photographer to notice. "Closer, please. This is close," I said. The photographer laughed uncertainly and took the picture. Grant kept both hands at his sides. By the next morning, his name was printed above a locker 3 places from mine. He arrived before most of the team and sat tying his boots with the same double knot he had used in college. I hated that I remembered. I hated more that he noticed me noticing. Training began badly. Everyone wanted to impress the new defender, and Grant responded by organizing players who had not asked to be organized. His voice carried across the wet field, calm and precise. He corrected angles, shifted the back line, and intercepted a pass I had threaded through 3 players. When he returned the ball, he sent it exactly half a step ahead of me, where I preferred it. Muscle memory is cruel. I controlled it without breaking stride. For the next hour, we avoided speaking directly. We did not need to. Grant knew when I would cut inside. I knew when he would step forward instead of dropping back. During the final scrimmage, I drew 2 defenders toward me and left a channel behind them. Grant saw it from 40 yards away and drove the ball through before I had fully turned. I reached it at the edge of the box and scored. No one celebrated like it mattered, but several teammates exchanged looks. Coach Nolan blew the whistle. Again. We did it again. After training, the other players drifted toward the building, while I stayed to take extra shots. The rain had thinned to mist, silver under the floodlights. I waited until I heard the equipment cart rattling, before gathering the loose balls. One remained near midfield. Grant reached it first. He rested his boot on top of it. At Hartwell, the last ball had been ours. We stayed after everyone else left, and passed it back and forth, until one of us finally missed on purpose. It had begun as extra practice, and become something neither of us named. The night Grant kissed me, that ball had been wedged behind his heel. He rolled it toward me now. I stepped aside and let it pass. The ball continued across the wet grass, until it struck the wheel of the equipment cart. Grant looked at the ground between us. I never forgot what happened. The restraint I had carried through the press room, the photograph, and 90 minutes of training pulled tight inside me. Remembering isn't the same as telling the truth. He raised his eyes. I know. No. You know how to say that now. That isn't the same thing. Coach Nolan called from the tunnel before Grant could answer. Avery Holloway, 7 tomorrow morning. Tactical room 2. I turned toward him. For what? You 2 are leading the transition unit. Our defense can't connect to the attack, and apparently you remember how to solve that problem. Behind me, Grant retrieved the final ball and placed it carefully in the cart. I walked toward the tunnel without waiting for him, but his footsteps followed at the same measured distance all the way inside. At 6:58 the next morning, Tactical Room 2 smelled like burnt coffee and dry erase marker. Grant was already there, standing beside the screen with 3 folders open in front of him. He had arranged them by color, the same way he used to organize match notes at Hartwell. Blue for defensive shape, red for transition, white for set pieces. I took the chair farthest from him and set my notebook down. Let's make this simple, I said. We talk about soccer. We do the work Nolan assigned. We don't discuss college unless it directly affects the job. Grant nodded once. All right? You don't ask about my life. You don't explain yours. You don't try to make this easier by acting like we're friends. His hand tightened around the cap of a marker, but his voice stayed even. Understood. I had expected resistance. The fact that he gave me none was somehow worse. Coach Nolan arrived with 2 academy players, Theo Briggs and Luis Mendoza, both 19 and trying very hard not to look nervous. Theo was a center back with good instincts and terrible timing. Luis was a winger who could outrun almost anyone, but treated defensive responsibility like a rumor. Nolan explained that Grant and I would be responsible for rebuilding the transition unit around them. Holloway teaches the line how to release. Avery teaches the attack how to read it. You've done this before. His gaze moved between us. Whatever history you have, leave it outside. I almost laughed. History had never stayed where people told it to. Our first drill collapsed in under 3 minutes. Grant stepped out from defense and expected me to move into the inside channel. I stayed wide, Theo followed Grant too late. Luis sprinted before the ball was secure, and the entire shape tore open. Nolan blew the whistle with enough force to make the academy players flinch. Again, the second attempt was worse. I saw the run Grant wanted from me, and deliberately chose another. He adjusted, but a half-second late. The ball went out. By the fourth repetition, even Jordan had stopped making jokes from the goal. Grant walked toward me while the others reset. "You're reading the space." "I always read the space." "Then use what you see. Maybe your pass is predictable." His eyes held mine. "You're weakening your own game to avoid trusting me." The words landed harder because they were true. "Careful," I said. "You've mistaken familiarity for permission before." Grant stepped back as if I had pushed him. He did not answer. On the next repetition, he changed the release point and forced me to choose. I could either stay outside and let the play die again, or cut across Theo's shoulder the way Grant knew I would. I moved. The pass arrived on my left foot, clean and sharp. Luis tracked inside behind me. I touched the ball into his path, then spun away from the pressure. 3 passes later, Theo drove it forward, and we finished with a shot Jordan barely reached. Nolan did not praise us. He simply pointed toward the starting positions. Again. This time, we moved before anyone spoke. Grant stepped. I cut. Luis recovered. Theo covered the space Grant left. The drill became fluid enough that the younger players stopped looking at us for instructions. Their bodies learned the pattern from ours. By the end of training, everyone had noticed. Mateo Silva, our right back, jogged past me and said, "Legendary chemistry, huh?" I told him to keep running. Grant pretended not to hear, but color rose along the back of his neck. When the group broke for water, Theo approached him with a question about positioning. Grant answered patiently, then called me over to explain the attacking angle. We stood on either side of the teenager, drawing invisible lines in the grass. For 10 minutes, we were not former almost lovers, or men carrying different versions of the same wound. We were simply good at the same thing from opposite directions. That should have felt harmless. Instead, it reminded me why I had trusted him in the first place. After lunch, we met again in the video room. Nolan left us alone with footage from the morning session and orders to prepare a revised drill for the next day. Grant paused the screen on the moment I refused his first pass. "You were already moving inside. I changed my mind. Because of me." I leaned back in my chair. "We said soccer. This is soccer. Then say what needs fixing." He stared at the frozen image for a long second. "I need to stop assuming you'll move, because you used to." That was not the answer I expected. He clicked forward to the successful sequence. "And you need to stop sacrificing the right decision just because I'm the one asking for it." I looked at him. "Still sounds like more than soccer." "Maybe it is." His voice dropped. "But I'm trying to respect the line you drew." Silence filled the room. Grant closed the laptop and rubbed a thumb across the edge of his notebook. "I was afraid," he said. "Back then, my body went still. That isn't soccer." "No." "Then we're done." I stood, but he did not reach for me. "Miles, I'm not asking you to forgive me." "Good. I just need you to know, I was afraid of what it meant." I turned toward him. "You keep saying that like fear was something that happened to you." His mouth opened, then closed. "It was something you did to me," I said. "Fear explains the choice. It does not repair it." Grant looked down at his hands. "I know. You know the sentence. I'm not sure you understand it." The next afternoon, Harbor City held an open media session beside the main practice field. Reporters moved between players while cameras caught drills in the background. I had just finished answering questions about the playoff race when a local columnist asked whether Grant's arrival might threaten my role in the team. Before I could respond, Grant stepped closer. "He's the reason our transition worked yesterday. If anyone's role is under review, it isn't his." The columnist smiled as though he had been handed a better story. "You seem eager to defend him." "I'm describing the session, Grant," I said quietly. He stopped. I answered the question myself, then waited until the cameras moved on before facing him. "Do not do that again." He was trying to provoke you. "I know how interviews work." I was only protecting me. His expression changed. "I didn't ask you to. You shouldn't have to ask someone to tell the truth." Interesting choice of words. Grant absorbed that without flinching. "You're right," he said. "About what?" "You should have been the one to answer." I stepped in because I wanted to fix the situation before it became a problem. That habit worked out well for us before. His face tightened, but he nodded. I'll stop. There was no argument, no attempt to explain his intention until it outweighed the impact. For the first time since he arrived, I saw something in him that might actually have changed. It did not soften me. It only made my anger less simple. Nolan extended our evening sessions after reviewing the new drill. He also assigned Grant and me to mentor Theo and Luis through the next 3 away matches. They need consistency, he said, and the 2 of you need repetition. Jordan coughed into his fist to hide a laugh. I kicked his chair on the way out. That evening, the training complex emptied early because rain was moving in from the harbor. Theo and Luis left after an hour, leaving Grant and me beneath the smaller field's floodlights. The wet turf reflected everything in broken silver. We worked without conversation, passing through cones, resetting angles, repeating the same sequence until instinct replaced caution. When the session ended, Grant collected the markers while I gathered the balls. One remained near the center circle. He did not move toward it immediately, neither did I. The distance between us felt measured by 7 years, 3 apologies he had not fully made, and 1 kiss neither of us had named honestly. Finally, Grant walked to the ball and sent it across the grass. The pass was gentle, almost tentative. I trapped it under my foot before I could decide not to. Grant waited. I rolled it back. The ball reached him cleanly. He stopped it, and for a second the field looked exactly as it had at Hartwell, after everyone else went inside. No audience, no explanations, just the 2 of us, and the last ball left out after practice. Then Nolan's message appeared on both our phones. Away match preparation begins tomorrow. Avery and Holloway will travel together with the academy group. Grant looked from the screen to me. I took my foot off the ball. 7 in the morning, I said. His answer was quiet. I'll be there. The trip began before sunrise, with Theo and Luis arguing over who had stolen the better seat on the team bus. Grant stood in the aisle holding 2 paper cups while they negotiated like international diplomats. He gave 1 cup to Theo, kept the other, and looked toward the empty seat beside me. For 1 uncomfortable second, I thought he might ask to sit there. Instead, he moved across the aisle and took the row behind the academy players. The coffee smelled like cinnamon. At Hartwell, he used to buy mine that way, after I complained the dining hall coffee tasted like boiled cardboard. I told myself the cup was his. Then he leaned forward and placed it in the holder beside my elbow. They made an extra. I looked at the handwritten M on the lid. Convenient. You don't have to drink it. I waited until he sat back before taking the first sip. Our evening sessions became routine over the following week. Theo and Luis stayed for the first hour, then left us alone on the smaller field, while the harbor wind pushed damp air through the chain-link fence. Grant never asked whether I wanted to continue the final ball ritual. He simply waited near midfield after the equipment cart was full. Some nights I passed the ball first. Other nights he did. We never kept count, but neither of us missed. It was almost peaceful if I ignored what peace with Grant had cost me before. During one session, pain flared above my left ankle when I planted to turn. I adjusted my stride before anyone could notice. Grant noticed. He changed the next drill, removing the sharp cut from my side without saying why. I stopped the ball. Put it back. The field is slick. It was slick 10 minutes ago. His gaze dropped briefly to my ankle. You're compensating. You're not the medical staff. No, I'm the defender watching you lose half a step. I was angry because he was right, and because he had always known my body on the field too well. You don't get to manage me. Grant picked up a cone and returned it to its original position. Then tell the staff yourself. Or what? Or nothing. I'm not your captain. The last word sounded deliberate. He turned away before I could answer. I finished the session, then reported the soreness to the trainer. It was only inflammation, manageable with treatment and reduced load. The next morning, Grant did not ask what the trainer had said. He simply adjusted his own positioning during practice, so I had less ground to cover. That kind of attention was dangerous, because it asked for nothing. It allowed me to imagine care without control, even though Grant had never been good at separating the two. After training, Nolan sent us to review Westbridge footage. Grant had spent 6 seasons there, 3 as captain, and the club had traded him with less ceremony than most teams gave an injured reserve player. On screen, he organized their defense through a match they eventually won. Why did they let you go? I asked. Grant paused the video. Contract dispute. That's the press answer. It's accurate. Accurate isn't the same as complete. He almost smiled at having his own language returned to him. Then he closed the folder in front of him. Westbridge had wanted him to support the decision to release a younger player who had reported harassment from an assistant coach. Grant refused. Management called him disloyal. He called them cowards. The dispute became public enough that the club needed someone to blame, but vague enough that Grant could be moved without anyone admitting why. You challenged an entire front office, I said. It was the right thing. You always know the right thing when it belongs to someone else. His expression went still. That's fair. The next afternoon, Grant and I ran a defensive transition exercise for Theo and Luis. Theo mistimed the same step 3 times and swore under his breath. Grant did not bark at him or take over. He moved Theo 2 yards to the left and asked what he could see from there. When Theo found the answer himself, Grant nodded like it had never been in doubt. Luis later overhit a cross and sent the ball toward the empty stands. I told him to retrieve it. Grant volunteered to go with him, and the two returned, arguing about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Grant laughed at something Luis said, head tipped back, shoulders loose. The sound caught me unprepared. In college, I had collected Grant's rare laughter like evidence that I knew a version of him other people did not. I had not heard it since. He looked across the field and found me watching. The laughter disappeared, but the warmth in his face remained. Daniel Reyes arrived after practice to record a feature about Harbor City's playoff push. He had played professionally for 4 years before a knee injury ended his career, which meant his questions were better than most. He asked about timing, movement, and the difference between seeing a passing lane and trusting it. Trust is expensive, I said. Players spend years learning when it's worth the risk. Daniel glanced past the camera toward Grant, who was helping Theo stack training mannequins. That sounded less like soccer than you probably intended. Occupational hazard. When the interview ended, Daniel removed his microphone and asked whether I knew a decent place to eat near the waterfront. Several. Would you show me one? His interest was clear without being presumptuous. I liked that. Before I could answer, Grant approached carrying a tablet. Nolan wants the transition review tonight. He said tomorrow morning, I replied. Grant looked at the screen as if it might rescue him. I thought we should do it while the session is fresh. Daniel watched him with open amusement. I'm sure the transition will still exist after dinner. Grant's jaw tightened. Probably. I told Daniel I would text him, then followed Grant toward the building. Once we were out of sight of the cameras, I stopped. Nolan didn't ask for a review tonight. No. Then why are we here? The footage is useful. Try again. Grant stared through the glass doors toward the field. Daniel was still there, speaking with the production crew. I didn't like the way he was looking at you. The honesty surprised both of us. That sounds like your problem. It is. Good. Handle it without inventing meetings. Grant nodded, but the tension in his face remained. Are you going out with him? You don't get to ask me that. I know. Do you? I moved closer, lowering my voice. Because you keep wanting the privileges of a life you won't even admit you want. Grant looked at me then. Really looked. With the same expression he had worn in the equipment room 7 years earlier, just before he kissed me. I kept track of you, he said. Every club, every injury, every time you made the national team shortlist. That isn't an answer. I watched your coming out interview. The air between us changed. That interview had lasted 11 minutes and taken me 3 months to agree to. I had worn a navy shirt because the producer said it looked trustworthy. I had hated that advice. Once? I asked. Grant shook his head. No. His voice was barely audible. I watched it until I knew where you paused. You said you were tired of letting silence speak for you. I remembered the line. I also remembered staring into the studio lights and thinking of him. Why didn't you contact me? The question came out quieter than I intended. Grant's gaze dropped to the tablet in his hand. I told myself you were better without me. That was convenient. Yes. What else? His fingers tightened around the case. I didn't know what I could offer you. You could have started with the truth. I know. Stop saying that. My voice sharpened. You watched me tell strangers what your lie had taught me, and you still stayed silent. Grant looked as if I had struck him, but he did not defend himself. I was ashamed. Of me? No. The answer came immediately. Of what I did. Those are not always different to the person you abandoned. We finished the review because professionalism was the only structure I trusted. Grant kept his comments precise. I kept mine, colder than necessary. On the screen, our movements fit together with humiliating ease. He paused on a sequence where I drew 2 defenders forward, and he released the pass before I turned. "You still lean left before you change direction," he said. "Only when I know the defender is watching my hips." "I always watched your hips." The sentence escaped before he could stop it. Silence followed. Grant looked away first. I closed the laptop. "We're done." Outside, the rain had started again. The floodlights over the smaller field were still on, illuminating the last ball where we had left it near midfield. Grant followed me to the edge of the turf but did not step onto it. "Miles." I kept walking. "Did you ever tell anyone?" I asked without turning. "Tell them what?" "That I hadn't imagined it. That you kissed me because you wanted to." Behind me, Grant was silent long enough that I already knew. "No." I crossed the field alone. The final ball remained between us, untouched, while I disappeared into the tunnel. The away match against Ridgeway United should have been simple. They sat 3 places below us in the table, their midfield pressed too high, and Nolan had spent the week drawing the same open channel on the board until even Theo could recite it from memory. But nothing about the day felt simple once I saw Evan Laird waiting near the tunnel. He had been a reserve winger at Hartwell, the kind of teammate who noticed everything because no one noticed him. 7 years ago, he had been one of the men standing outside the equipment room when Grant walked away from me. Now he wore Ridgeway's warm-up jacket and looked at Grant with the guarded familiarity of someone carrying an old debt. "Avery," he said, pulling me into a quick hug. Then his eyes shifted over my shoulder. "Holloway." Grant gave him a brief nod. No one smiled. We played the first half like strangers who had memorized each other's habits. Ridgeway cut off the central lanes, forcing me wide, while Grant kept stepping into midfield to pull their forwards out of shape. In the 37th minute, he won the ball cleanly and looked up. I was already moving. His pass arrived between 2 defenders, fast enough that I had to trust it before I could see the space. I let it run across my body and sent Luis through on goal. Luis hit the post. Grant shouted encouragement from 40 yards away, and the sound scraped against something raw in me. At halftime, Nolan praised the sequence and demanded more of it. Grant never looked directly at me, but when he handed me a bottle of water, his fingers stopped short of mine. Evan found me after the final whistle. We had won 1-0 on a late set piece, and most of the team had gone inside to change. I was near the player's entrance, stretching my ankle, when he sat beside me on the concrete step. "You know he almost lost his scholarship because of you," he said. I turned toward him. "That's a strange way to start a conversation." "Because of what happened to you," Evan corrected. He stared out at the emptying stands. "The morning after he told everyone you misunderstood him, Pierce made a comment in the locker room. Something about you inventing the whole thing because you were desperate." Grant put him into a row of lockers. I remembered Pierce's split lip and the story that he had slipped in the shower. Grant never told me. That was the problem. He fought anyone who made it worse, but he never corrected the lie that started it. I wanted the information to change nothing. It did not make Grant's denial smaller or my humiliation less real, but it disturbed the clean version of the past I had carried for years. In that version, Grant kissed me, panicked, and erased me, because I meant nothing compared with the life he wanted. Evan's story offered something more complicated and less comforting. Grant had cared. He had been angry. He had nearly damaged his own future. Then he had still allowed me to leave Hartwell believing I had imagined the only honest moment between us. "Why are you telling me now?" I asked. Evan rubbed his palms together against the cold, because regret made him miserable, and he started treating misery like punishment. "It wasn't. You were the one who paid." He stood. "Don't forgive him because he suffered. Just don't assume suffering was the same as not caring." The team gathered at a restaurant near the hotel after the match. Daniel was covering another game nearby and appeared halfway through dinner, still wearing his broadcaster's credential. He asked whether the empty chair beside me was taken. Before I could answer, Grant moved his jacket from the seat across the table. "There's room here." Daniel glanced between us. I was asking Miles, and I was moving my jacket. Grant's voice remained polite, which only made the tension more obvious. Daniel sat beside me. Over the next 20 minutes, Grant joined every conversation Daniel started, corrected a statistic no one cared about, and volunteered that we had video review at 8 the next morning. When Daniel touched my forearm while laughing, Grant bent the metal cap of his water bottle between two fingers. I let it continue until Grant followed me out into the hotel corridor. "You're going the wrong way," he said. "My room is near the elevators." "I know. Then why are you behind me?" His jaw worked once. "I wanted to make sure you got back. From the restaurant on the first floor?" "Miles." I turned before we reached the elevators. "Say it." "Say what?" "The thing you've spent all night trying not to say." A housekeeping cart stood abandoned near the wall, its clean towels stacked between us like witnesses. Grant looked toward the restaurant doors, then back at me. "I don't like him touching you." "That is not my problem." "I know." "No, you know the words. We've established that." He exhaled through his nose. "I'm jealous." The admission was quiet but complete. "And what exactly do you think jealousy gives you?" "Nothing." "Then stop acting like I'm breaking a promise I never made." Grant stepped closer, not enough to trap me, but enough that I could see the faint scar at his chin from Hartwell. "I'm trying not to lie to you." "Then tell the whole truth." "I don't know how." "That has always been your excuse." His face tightened. "The kiss happened because I wanted it." The corridor seemed to lose its air. "I wanted you before that night. I wanted you after. I have thought about you in every city I played in, and none of that makes what I did less cowardly." He swallowed. "But you did not misunderstand me. 7 years ago, those words would have saved something in me. Now they arrive too late to feel like rescue." "You don't get credit for finally admitting reality." "I'm not asking for credit." "What are you asking for?" Grant looked at my mouth, then forced his gaze back to my eyes. "I don't know yet." I laughed once, without humor. "Of course you don't." He lifted a hand, stopping before it reached my face. The unfinished gesture hurt more than a touch would have. "I know what I feel when you walk into a room," he said. "I know what it does to me when someone else gets close to you. I know I've never wanted anyone the way I don't." My voice cracked across the corridor. Grant's hand dropped. "You do not get to finish that sentence while you still call yourself straight everywhere else," I said. "You don't get to treat me like a private exception and expect me to be grateful because the exception feels intense. I'm not asking you to be grateful." "Then what are you asking?" "Time. You had 7 years." The elevator doors opened beside us, revealing an empty car. Neither of us moved. Grant's eyes were bright with anger, but not at me. "I'm trying to understand what choosing you would mean. That's the problem. You keep making me the consequence." He flinched. I stepped into the elevator and held the door. "Wanting me is not the same as choosing me, Grant." He entered before the doors closed, leaving space between us. The mirrored wall reflected 2 men standing close enough to touch, and looking everywhere except at each other. When the elevator shuddered upward, Grant said, "What would choosing you actually cost me?" There was no accusation in his voice, only fear, finally stripped of its professional calm. I looked at our reflections. "Everything you protected when you said I made it up." The doors opened on my floor. I walked out before he could answer. My phone began vibrating before I reached my room. At first I assumed it was Jordan asking whether Daniel had stayed. Then a second notification appeared, followed by a third. Grant's phone started buzzing behind me. I opened the first message. It was from our media director. "Do not respond publicly until we speak." Beneath it sat a link to an anonymous account. The post contained an old photograph from Hartwell. Grant and I were entering the equipment room after the championship party, his hand at my lower back, my head turned toward him. The caption asked whether Harbor City's newest teammates had been hiding more than legendary chemistry. Grant stopped several feet away. "Miles." Another message appeared, then another. Reporters were already calling. The story was spreading faster than either of us could speak. I looked from the photograph to Grant and saw the same fear that had stood between us 7 years earlier. This time, I knew exactly what it could make him do. By 7 the next morning, Harbor City's media room had become a courtroom without a judge. The communications director, Dana Walsh, sat at the head of the table with 3 phones, 2 laptops, and the expression of someone calculating how much truth a club could survive before sponsors became nervous. Coach Nolan stood by the window. Grant sat across from me, hands folded, shoulders rigid. The photograph from Hartwell glowed on the wall screen behind Dana. Every time I looked at it, I saw details the internet could not understand. Grant's thumb pressed lightly against my back, the crooked collar of my shirt, the fact that I was smiling, because I had no idea he would erase me before breakfast. Dana summarized the situation in careful language. The post had been shared thousands of times. Reporters were contacting former teammates, One columnist had already suggested that my history with Grant created a conflict of interest inside the team. "We need one consistent response," she said. "Nothing improvised." The proposed statement appeared on the screen. Harbor City FC is aware of speculation regarding two members of its playing staff. Grant Holloway and Miles Avery were college teammates and have never had a romantic relationship. Any suggestion otherwise is false and intrusive. I read the second sentence twice. The room changed around me. Dana continued talking about privacy, defamation, and protecting both players before the next match. My attention remained on 5 words. Never had a romantic relationship. Grant leaned toward the table. "That takes Miles out of it," he said. "It makes the story about an invented rumor instead of his private life." Dana nodded. "Exactly. If both of you approve, we can release it within the hour." Grant looked at me then, expecting perhaps a discussion about wording. What he saw on my face made him stop breathing. "You already approved this?" I asked. Dana answered before he could. "Grant reviewed a preliminary version late last night. I told them to keep your name out of anything about my identity," Grant said quickly. "This was the cleanest way." "Cleanest for whom?" Nolan moved away from the window. "Miles, no one is releasing anything until you both agree." "He agreed for both of us." Grant stood. "That isn't what happened. You told them to say it never existed. I was trying to stop them from doing to you what they did in college." A laugh escaped me, sharp enough that Dana closed one of the laptops. "What they did?" I asked. "You still talk about that morning as if a crowd created the lie, and you were standing somewhere else." Grant followed me into the corridor when I left. I kept walking until we reached the empty equipment hall beneath the west stand. Metal shelving lined both walls. The resemblance to Hartwell was almost cruel. "Miles, listen to me. I have been listening to you explain your intentions for 7 years. The statement would protect you. By denying me again, we weren't in a relationship. You kissed me. You told me you wanted me. You spent the last 3 weeks acting jealous when another man looked at me. And the moment someone outside this building noticed, you found the most official language possible to make it disappear." Grant moved closer, then stopped when I stepped back. "I was trying to keep reporters from turning you into a scandal. You don't get to decide which truth I can survive." His face lost color. "That wasn't what I meant. Meaning is the shelter you keep running to after the damage is done." My voice shook, and I hated that he could hear it. "You think protection means getting there first, controlling the story, closing the door, making the decision before anyone else can hurt the people you care about. But you never ask whether the door locks from the outside." Grant looked past me at the shelves, as though the room had finally shown him its shape. "I thought if I denied the rumor, they would leave you alone. They won't. They'll call me a liar, or obsessed, or the gay teammate who misread another straight man. Again." I stepped closer now, because anger had burned through caution. "You did not protect me from the old humiliation. You recreated it with a better press office." He closed his eyes. When he opened them, the defense had gone out of his expression. "You're right. Do not say that unless you understand what happens next. Tell me. From now on, we speak about training, matches, and the players we're mentoring. Nothing else. No late-night conversations. No questions about Daniel. No final ball after practice." His jaw tightened at the last condition, but he nodded. "And if you release that statement," I said, "I will answer publicly for myself. I won't release it. You already chose it. Then I'll unchoose it. That doesn't put me back where I was yesterday." I walked away before he could turn the correction into another request for patience. Our coordination collapsed during training. Grant sent passes where I had been, instead of where I was going. I held the ball too long rather than use the channel he created. Theo and Luis began hesitating between us. Nolan stopped the session after Grant and I ruined the same transition twice. "Both of you, inside." In his office, he closed the door and remained standing. "I do not need details," he said. "I need professionals." "You have them," Grant answered. Nolan looked toward the window, where the rest of the squad waited on the field. "I have 2 excellent players using 11 men to conduct an argument. Whatever decision you make about each other, make it quickly enough that these kids stop paying for it." Grant said nothing. I told Nolan it would not happen again. I meant it, because professionalism was easier than grief. When we returned outside, I played safely. So did Grant. We made no mistakes, and nothing worked. Daniel found me that afternoon, at a cafe across from the stadium. I had agreed to meet him because the alternative was returning to my apartment and reading strangers debate whether the worst night of my college career had been romantic. He did not ask for gossip. He asked whether I wanted company. That restraint nearly undid me. He did it again, I said eventually. Daniel stirred his coffee. Denied you? He called it protection. People use that word when they want control to sound generous. I looked at him. You don't know him. No. But I know what it feels like when someone makes a decision about your life and expects gratitude because they were scared. He did not touch me or turn the conversation into an opportunity. When we left, he said dinner could wait until my life was not on fire. The kindness of that made one thing clear. Being wanted did not have to feel like being cornered. That evening, my agent called with an offer from Portland Crown, 2 years guaranteed, improved salary, and a system built around an attacking midfielder. They wanted an answer within 10 days. I stood at my kitchen window, watching rain move across the harbor, while he explained the contract. Portland had made inquiries before Grant arrived. This was not an escape route invented by pain. It was a real career decision, which made it harder to understand why my first thought was that leaving would end the argument before Grant could hurt me again. Jordan came over after training and read the offer at my table. It's good, he said. I know. Do you want it? I want not to feel stupid. Jordan leaned back. That wasn't the question. I looked toward the dark window. Staying feels like believing him. Maybe. Leaving could mean choosing yourself. He paused. Or it could mean making sure he never gets the chance to choose differently. Only you know which one it is. Grant spent the next day doing what he should have done 7 years earlier. I learned about it indirectly. Dana called to tell me the proposed statement had been withdrawn. Grant had insisted that the club release nothing about me without my approval. He had also submitted his own written correction. The college kiss happened. I had not fabricated or misunderstood it. Grant had denied it because of his fear. Any questions about his identity should be directed to him rather than attached to my name. The club's lawyers hated it. Grant refused to replace it with cleaner language. Evan later sent me a message saying Grant had called him and asked exactly what he remembered from Hartwell. Not to challenge him, to make sure Grant did not soften the past when he spoke about it. None of that repaired us. It only proved that Grant had finally recognized the work. He told Nolan and the senior players that he was questioning labels he had treated as fixed for most of his life. He said the responsibility for the rumor belonged to him, not me. He contacted his former college coach and admitted that his version of the incident had been false. Then he called his parents. I did not know what was said. Grant did not send me a message afterward. For the first time, he did something difficult without using the difficulty as evidence that I owed him hope. 2 nights later, I remained on the smaller field after everyone left. My phone rested on the bench with Portland's offer open on the screen. The floodlights made the empty seats beyond the fence look pale and distant. I heard Grant approach, but did not turn. He stopped several yards away, respecting the boundary I had set. Neither of us spoke. A ball lay near the touchline. Grant walked to it and sent it slowly across the turf. It rolled until it stopped halfway between us. I told them the truth, he said. I know. I'm not asking you to do anything with that. The ball remained motionless beneath the lights. I stared at it, remembering every night we had passed it back and forth, as if repetition could make trust permanent. I don't know if staying would mean I believe you, I said, or that I still haven't learned. Grant's face tightened, but he did not come closer. I left the ball where it was and walked into the tunnel without returning it. Grant's correction went public the next morning. There was no press conference or photograph beneath club logos. Harbor City released a short statement saying the college kiss had happened, that I had neither fabricated nor misunderstood it, and that Grant had denied it because he was afraid. The final line said, "Questions about Grant's identity belong to Grant alone." By noon, every sports network had rewritten the same 6 paragraphs. Some praised him. Others called it a distraction before the most important match of our season. When a reporter asked whether I was the reason he now identified as bisexual, Grant said, "Miles is not an explanation for me. He is a person I hurt while I was refusing to understand myself." He did not call afterward. Jordan told me Grant had spoken to the senior players before training. He said he was bisexual, or queer if the broader word fit better, and that he was still learning which language felt like his. He did not ask for applause. He asked them not to make me responsible for his disclosure. Each piece of news reached me through someone else, because Grant respected the distance I had demanded. That restraint proved honesty was becoming a way of living, even if I never returned. The night before the decisive match, Grant waited outside the video room after everyone left. He stayed far enough away that I could keep walking. "I owe you an apology without a request attached," he said. I stopped. "At Hartwell, you did not misunderstand me. I kissed you because I wanted you, and the next morning I lied because I was afraid of what that meant for me. I let you carry the humiliation because protecting my image mattered more than protecting the truth. Then I did it again here. I called it strategy and protection, but I was still deciding that my fear gave me the right to erase your reality." His voice shook once. "I am sorry. You do not owe me forgiveness, another chance, or your contract." I looked at him. "Why now?" "Because I finally understand that regret is not repair." He nodded toward the exit. "Good luck tomorrow, Miles." Then he left before I could decide whether I wanted him to stay. The stadium was full the next night. Harbor City needed a win to secure a playoff place. A draw left us dependent on another result. A loss ended the season. Portland's offer remained unanswered. Nolan started Grant and me together, despite the risk. "Whatever happens after tonight is yours," he told us in the tunnel. "For 90 minutes, this belongs to the team." Grant stood 2 places ahead of me with the captain's armband Nolan had given him. When we walked onto the field, the sound came down from the stands like weather. The game was ugly from the first whistle. Our opponents pressed high and targeted the space behind me. Grant covered it twice without complaint. I tracked back when he stepped forward. We spoke only in the language of the match. Left, hold, turn, again. In the 63rd minute, Theo lost the ball near midfield, and their striker broke toward goal. Grant could have dropped into the safer position. Instead, he trusted my recovery run and stepped toward the ball. I reached the runner before the pass, knocked it loose, and Grant drove forward. Luis sprinted down the right. I moved inside. Grant had the option to play safely toward the wing, protecting himself if the attack failed. He looked at me and sent the ball through the narrowest channel on the field. The pass reached me exactly where it had during our first successful drill after his transfer. I touched it beyond the midfielder and drew the center back toward me. Everyone expected the pass right. I cut left and slipped the ball behind the defense to Theo, who had kept running after his mistake. Theo struck it first time. The net lifted. The stadium erupted. He turned in disbelief before sprinting toward us. The team collided near the corner flag. Grant reached me through the bodies, but stopped before pulling me close. I made the choice for him. I caught the back of his neck and pressed my forehead briefly to his temple. It was not a kiss or forgiveness, but it was the first touch between us that neither fear nor secrecy controlled. We won 1-0. After the final whistle, Grant found Theo before anyone else and told him the goal belonged to the run he made after losing the ball. Cameras surrounded us. Reporters shouted questions about the statement, the playoffs, and the photograph from Hartwell. Grant answered only the match questions. When one reporter asked whether his disclosure changed my contract decision, Grant stepped away instead of answering for me. I said my career decision would be made for football reasons and left the cameras behind. In the locker room, Nolan sprayed cheap champagne across the ceiling. Across the room, Grant watched me laugh, then looked away before the watching became a claim. I met him on the smaller practice field after midnight. The stadium was dark except for maintenance lights and the harbor glow. Grant stood near midfield with the final ball at his feet. He looked surprised when I approached. "I thought you would be celebrating." I was. I placed my phone on the bench. Portland's offer was still open. I asked for 2 more days. Grant nodded. "You should take the best deal for you." "I know." I walked closer until the ball rested between us. "You said you owed me an apology without a request attached." "I did. Now I'm asking what you want." Grant's breath left him slowly. "I want you, but that is not enough, and I know that now." He met my eyes. "I wanted you when I was too afraid to deserve you. I love you now, and I'm not asking you to hide while I learn how to be brave. I'm not asking you to wait for some future version of me either. I have told my family, the club, and the people I lied to. I will keep telling the truth, whether you choose me or not." His voice softened. "I do not want you to be my exception. I want a life where loving you is part of who I am, not the thing I explain away." "You don't get the man I was at Hartwell," I said. The one who would accept whatever you gave him and call it enough. Grant nodded. I know. You don't get to make decisions for me because you think you can see danger first. I understand. Or I'm learning to. I stepped on top of the ball, and if I stay in Harbor City, it cannot be proof that I forgave you. I may stay, because this team is mine, because Theo is finally timing his runs, because Jordan will complain for 6 months if I leave. Those are good reasons. You can be one reason, not the reason. His eyes shone beneath the lights. That is more than I have any right to ask. I sent the ball toward him. Grant trapped it but did not return it immediately. Are you sure? He asked. The question mattered more than the pass. About trying, I said. Not about trusting you completely. That takes longer. Then we take longer. He rolled the ball back. I stopped it, crossed the distance between us, and placed one hand against his jaw. Grant remained still until I pulled him closer. The kiss was nothing like the one at Hartwell. That kiss had been hurried and hidden, Grant's fear already waiting outside the door. This one was slow enough for both of us to choose it. When we separated, he rested his forehead against mine, only after I stayed near him. No locked doors, I said. No locked doors, he promised. I renewed with Harbor City 3 days later, after the club improved its offer, and Nolan agreed to build more of the attack around my position. Grant was part of the decision, but not its foundation. We did not announce our relationship. We simply stopped arranging our lives around the possibility of being seen. By winter, our teammates knew, because Grant waited for me after training, because I stole food from his plate during away trips, and because he no longer stepped back when I touched his arm in public. Trust returned unevenly. Grant learned to ask before protecting. I learned that staying for an honest conversation was not the same as waiting for someone who refused to choose me. On the last training night before the holiday break, Theo and Luis left the final ball near midfield on purpose. Grant and I stood on opposite sides while they watched from the tunnel, pretending not to. Grant sent the first pass. I returned it harder. He laughed and trapped it with the inside of his boot. We kept going until the maintenance crew switched off half the lights, and Jordan shouted that normal couples went to dinner. Grant looked toward me instead of the tunnel. I sent the ball back one final time. I used to think being loved meant being wanted. Grant taught me the harder part was being chosen, and this time, I chose him too.